Beijing has extended a measured but pointed response to Japan's new leadership, expressing both restraint and expectation as the two Asian powers enter a delicate new chapter. The Chinese Foreign Ministry today said it hopes to advance relations with Tokyo, following the historic appointment of Sanae Takaichi as Japan's first female prime minister, a figure long known in Beijing as a strong advocate of military expansion and closer US alignment. Speaking from the ministry's daily press briefing in Beijing, spokesman Guo Jiakun acknowledged Japan's leadership transition as an internal affair, but used the occasion to reassert China's long-standing demands that Tokyo adhere strictly to political understandings forged decades ago. In his words, "We have noted the election results. This is Japan's internal affair. China and Japan are close neighbors, and China's basic position on China-Japan relations is consistent and clear." The remarks marked the first official Chinese reaction to Takaichi's appointment, which was finalized by the Japanese Diet earlier today following a leadership contest within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Her rise comes at a time when Japan's foreign and defense posture is being closely watched across the region, particularly by Beijing, which has repeatedly warned against Tokyo's participation in US-led security initiatives that Beijing perceives as containment. Guo continued, "We hope that Japan will work with China, adhere to all principles of the 4 China-Japan political documents, honor its political commitments on major issues including history and Taiwan, maintain the political foundation of bilateral relations, and comprehensively advance the China-Japan strategic and mutually beneficial relationship." Those 4 political documents, the 1972 Joint Communiqué, the 1978 Treaty of Peace and Friendship, the 1998 Joint Declaration, and the 2008 Joint Declaration Statement, form the backbone of modern Sino-Japanese diplomacy. Each agreement affirmed mutual recognition, non-interference, and cooperation, but they also enshrined a fundamental principle: Japan must respect Beijing's sovereignty claims, especially regarding Taiwan and historical memory of wartime aggression. The mention of history and Taiwan is no coincidence. It signals China's enduring unease with Tokyo's recent security realignment and with Prime Minister Takaichi's own record of controversial statements, particularly her previous visits to the Yasukuni Shrine, where Japan's wartime dead, including convicted war criminals, are honored. For China, those visits remain a painful reminder of Japan's imperial past and a recurring obstacle to trust. Takaichi, 63, is a conservative stalwart within Japan's Liberal Democratic Party and one of the most hawkish voices on defense policy. During her tenure as communications minister and later as policy chief, she championed the expansion of Japan's military capabilities, the revision of its pacifist constitution, and a stronger stance against what she termed Chinese coercion. Her victory is being celebrated by nationalist circles at home, but greeted with caution across Asia. In Beijing, the language of Guo Jiakun was firm but measured, a diplomatic balancing act reflecting China's awareness that Japan remains a vital economic partner despite the political frictions. Bilateral trade exceeded $300 billion last year, and both nations remain deeply intertwined through supply chains, investment, and tourism. Yet, political trust between the two sides has been eroding, accelerated by Tokyo's alignment with Washington and its participation in the Quad alliance alongside the US, India, and Australia. The Foreign Ministry's reference to major issues, including history and Taiwan, also underscores the increasing centrality of the Taiwan question in regional diplomacy. Beijing has repeatedly criticized Japan for statements and defense plans that it interprets as interference in China's internal affairs. Earlier this year, Japan's defense white paper described Taiwan's stability as vital to Japan's security, a phrasing that China denounced as provocative. At the same time, the appointment of Takaichi, the first woman to hold Japan's highest political office, introduces a symbolic shift in Tokyo's political landscape. Her gender represents a break from tradition, but her policies signal continuity, even acceleration, of Japan's nationalist and security-focused trajectory. For Beijing, this creates both a challenge and an opportunity, a chance to test whether pragmatic engagement can coexist with ideological divergence. In state media editorials, Chinese commentators today struck a dual tone. The nationalist tabloid Global Times acknowledged the historic significance of Japan's leadership change, but warned against what it called a regression into Cold War thinking, Other outlets stressed that mutual respect and non-interference remain essential foundations for stable ties. Official channels amplified Guo Jiakun's message, emphasizing that the two countries should focus on cooperation, not confrontation. For much of the past decade, China-Japan relations have oscillated between cautious thaw and renewed strain. The 2018 visit of then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to Beijing marked a tentative warming, but disputes in the East China Sea and competing regional visions soon revived tensions. The COVID-19 pandemic added another layer of complexity, disrupting people-to-people exchanges and amplifying nationalist rhetoric on both sides. In recent years, Japan has deepened its security cooperation with the United States, hosting advanced missile systems and joint exercises in Okinawa and other regions. Tokyo has also provided significant economic support to Southeast Asian countries facing maritime disputes with Beijing, a policy that Chinese officials regard as indirect containment. In response, Beijing has sought to frame Japan's actions as being driven by external manipulation, particularly by Washington. Against this backdrop, Guo's reference to the four political documents serves as a reminder of the diplomatic architecture that both nations are expected to uphold. The agreements were designed to stabilize relations through shared commitments, recognition of one China, peaceful coexistence, and economic partnership. However, in practice, those principles have been repeatedly tested by real-world frictions, from territorial disputes over the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands to trade restrictions and mutual accusations of military expansionism. For Tokyo, the rise of Sanae Takaichi represents a continuation of Japan's shift toward a more assertive security policy, one that embraces collective defense, strengthens deterrence, and deepens integration with the US Indo-Pacific strategy. For Beijing, it raises the question of whether the new leadership will engage diplomatically or confrontationally on regional flashpoints. Analysts in Beijing's think tanks, such as the China Institute of International Studies, describe Takaichi's victory as expected but concerning, noting that her record leans toward containment rather than cooperation. Yet others pointed out that Japan's political system, constrained by coalition dynamics and economic imperatives, may temper any abrupt shifts in policy. As one expert noted, China will judge not by words, but by deeds. Guo Jiakun's comments thus serve as both a signal and a test. The message is that Beijing is watching carefully, ready to cooperate if Tokyo honors its commitments, but equally ready to push back if red lines, especially Taiwan, are crossed. The emphasis on advancing a strategic and mutually beneficial relationship suggests that China does not seek confrontation, but expects reciprocity. In practical terms, both sides face pressing shared interests that could anchor dialogue, stabilizing supply chains, managing maritime risks, promoting green technology cooperation, and reviving tourism after years of pandemic disruption. Yet these practical goals will remain vulnerable to political mistrust. Any misstep, a visit to a controversial shrine, a statement on Taiwan, a joint military drill, could reignite diplomatic friction. In Tokyo, the immediate challenge for Prime Minister Takaichi will be to balance her domestic base's hawkish expectations with the realities of Japan's economic dependence on China, its largest trading partner. In her first address to Parliament, she pledged to defend Japan's sovereignty and values while maintaining constructive relations with all neighbors. But she also reaffirmed Japan's alignment with democratic allies in the Indo-Pacific, language that, in Beijing's eyes, often masks strategic encirclement. Beijing's tone today reflects its cautious approach. By describing Japan's leadership change as an internal affair, China sought to avoid appearing confrontational. Yet by immediately invoking history and Taiwan, it reaffirmed the non-negotiable parameters of engagement. The dual message is typical of Chinese diplomacy at such moments, offering a path to cooperation while defining the boundaries of acceptable behavior. For many in the region, the timing of this leadership change could hardly be more sensitive. The United States and its allies are deepening defense integration under the AUKUS and Quad frameworks, while tensions in the South and East China Seas continue to simmer. Taiwan's recent elections have further complicated the regional calculus, with Beijing intensifying military pressure and Washington expanding security assurances to Taipei. In this charged environment, Japan's stance carries disproportionate weight. Beyond geopolitics, both countries also face domestic constraints. China is grappling with economic slowdown, deflationary pressures, and weakening investor confidence. Japan, meanwhile, struggles with an aging population, fiscal challenges, and a volatile political landscape. These internal pressures could either push the two nations toward pragmatic cooperation or drive them into competitive posturing as they each seek to project strength abroad. Over the next months, diplomatic engagements will test whether the cautious tone struck by Guo Jiakun can be translated into real progress. High-level exchanges remain limited, though both sides have expressed interest in restarting economic and cultural dialogues. The business community in both countries continues to advocate for stability, warning that political rifts could harm trade, technology transfer, and regional supply chains. For now, China's message is clear. Cooperation remains possible, but only if Japan respects what Beijing defines as the political foundation of their ties. Whether Takaichi's government reciprocates that sentiment will determine whether this historic leadership transition opens a new chapter of pragmatism or revives an old cycle of mistrust. As Guo Jiakun concluded, we hope that Japan will work with China, adhere to all principles of the four political documents, honour its political commitments on major issues including history and Taiwan, maintain the political foundation of bilateral relations, and comprehensively advance the China-Japan strategic and mutually beneficial relationship